Welcome to The Blended. My name is Eric. I'm here with Ann. What's up, Ann?
How we doing today?
Oh, another beautiful day in Southwest Florida.
Yes, it is. So we got a question
Okay.
about titles, like how a partner coming in, a step parent coming into the equation,
Right.
introduces that. Is it how do you handle that conversation with your partner, with the children, potentially with the biological parent? If you're still playing a role in the child's life, even though the parents aren't together, I imagine you're going to have a much larger say in what your child calls a step parent.
I would think so. I mean, God forbid me and my beautiful wife ever split, which that's not going to happen, but I couldn't imagine Savvy, my little girl, calling somebody. I think I would be very, very touchy with
What
that.
would you say is the best way to approach that conversation? Because, and again, there's so many layers to this we've spoken to prior to this pod, but we're working under the assumption that you've picked a responsible person.
Right.
You've been with them long enough to know how they're going to impact your children and think that it's safe and responsible to introduce them to your children.
Well, I mean,
they're in your children's lives.
I think if...
So how do you then broach this topic?
Well, I think if, number one, it goes back to a few pods back in the day where we said, please, if you're going to have young ones around the new person,
right?
Make sure they're vetted. Yeah. Right? You cannot do that. You can't do that haphazardly, right?
Right. No, I'm saying we're having this discussion about titles working under the assumption that that's the course you've taken.
Right. Yeah, you vetted that person.
Right,
You already know who you're dealing with.
Right. This is not a guy you met 2 weeks ago and you're just dating and figuring it out. Like, it's you put time into this person outside of your children.
Right. Before your kids got to know them.
Right.
But once you've decided that it's time,
and they're a permanent fixture,
and most likely they live together.
Right.
That you all live together and you're a blended family. Once that happens, then that's a really big discussion. But that discussion most likely happens before you move in together, right?
And I was just gonna say, like, that's probably the tipping point for this discussion is if you're dating someone and he or she has been around the kids, for 6 months, a year, whatever, and they know, well, just for the sake of conversation, say it's a man being introduced to a woman's children, and now we have Bob coming into the picture, and the kids know Bob, they get along with Bob, they see Bob every now and again, he stops by the house to pick up mom, or maybe hangs out to watch a football game on a Saturday night, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there's been interaction with Bob, right? But I imagine the tipping point of what you call Bob and that discussion being broached would come if Bob and Mary decide we're going to take this up a notch and we're going to start living together. But because now you're going to have those children, let's say mom has 50-50 or, even more custody. Now you're going to be around these children practically 24/7.
Right.
So it's not just a couple hours watching a football game. It's day in, day out. And I imagine that would be the time where you really broach this question.
Yeah, that's probably when they say, like, the rubber meets the road, right?
Right.
That's when Bob most likely deserves a title or is going to want a title.
Right. Again, we're working under the assumption that Bob is living up to that title.
Bob is, of course.
Doing day in, day out, stepdad stuff.
Right. And I think there's different levels to that. You know, as I get older, I realize, the way I parent, the way I was a stepdad is different than some people do it. Right. Some people are not as invested as I might have been. And I have my reasons to be as, deeply invested in their growth. But that doesn't mean that someone who's not deeply invested in their growth, the titles are different.
Yeah.
But I would say once you decide that Bob's going to be hanging out, then that topic of conversation will or must come up, because even if it's titles are so important because from a respect level, that's how our children determine respect.
Right.
They determine respect based on the title. For example, I'm a police officer. Sometimes innately a kid, I don't say innately, but we program our children to respect the police officer.
And Mr. Someone is different than just Bob.
And Mr. Someone is definitely different than Bob.
Yeah.
Or, so that's important. That's important for them to understand who's in front of them, or who does what in their life.
Right.
What positions do this person play in your life? And I think that, creates, things like empathy.
Right.
That creates, some of these behaviors that we're looking for our children to have. I say in my case, that conversation came up. But
their inkling was you want to be called Dad.
Yeah, that was the first. Yeah, that's the first inkling. The first looks they give you, like what? What do you mean? And then as I explain where the benchmark begins, and I'm letting them know at this point the benchmark begins at Mr. Eric, and then from there you're allowed to let your mind go whatever you want it to be. I remember saying to them, "There's something descriptive in your mind that fits me."
Okay, that's cute. I like that because I can say like, "Oh, we cuddle all the time," and I can say, "Cuddles, come here."
Right. What's your cuddles?
Yeah. And that might be more like for a dog or something, but
like
the example is that like, please find a descriptor for me. Like pick something that describes our relationship or how you think of me.
Exactly.
That's cute. I like that.
Yeah, and so that was it. But the benchmark, because we were changing Eric, so that was non-negotiable.
All right.
Right, that was non-negotiable. There was no negotiation.
Was there any fight back to that?
I think there was, when you say fight, I think it was new.
Pushback.
Right, it was pushback, because I think it was new.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of I forgot. And there was a lot of I remind you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, also, too, like, in my situation, I've been calling my stepdad by his name since I was 3 years old.
Right.
So if he had that conversation with me when I was 10, I'd be like, well, it's going to take me a second because I've been calling you by your first name for the last 7 years. That's just going to be, habit by now.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah, there is time for that, but you also can tell a difference between, habit and just, not following orders.
straight rebellion. Straight like, I'm going to call you this, and I'm going to call you that again. Matter of fact, I'm going to hit you with that at least 10 times today. Oh, my bad. Like you just said, as when we get older, and as adults, we can look back and peer into our minds when we were a kid.
Yeah.
And we can remember when change came,
right?
Fighting it. One of them said, "Pops."
And how quickly was that decision made?
The Pops?
Yeah.
No, I just kind of said the Mr. Eric is being implemented ASAP.
And then when did Pops come along after that?
That came maybe 5 days later.
Okay.
Because I remember driving in the car.
Yeah.
And I remember her being like, "This is what it is." And I remember me being like, "Okay, cool."
Were you happy with that?
I think I was very happy with that.
I would imagine so. That's pretty big. I mean, it's pretty close to Dad.
Pretty close. I mean,
pretty close to
pretty
Dad.
Close. And I call my dad Pops. So it was pretty. I remember saying that to my wife. But now keep in mind, at that point, that was the oldest, and at that point, it wasn't a. At that point, she wasn't the one that was my cheerleader. You know what I'm saying? So
it had to mean even more coming from her.
Yeah, but but I don't think it was like. I might have been like, "Oh my goodness," but in her mind, she's like, "I just came up with another name."
Ah, okay. You're not sure that it had the significance that we think Pops has in our eyes.
No.
So what was the other child's decision?
Mr. Eric.
Did that change? Has that changed to this day?
And that's why parents got to remember it's so transitional.
Yeah.
Because one has been Pops since that day, and it's never changed.
Okay.
One has went from Mr. Eric to Daddy.
Hardcore.
To Eric.
ooh, that hurts.
Yeah, but that's why the glory comes later, because I'm always going to keep the standard that I believe in, and
right, your standard isn't going to change.
No, it's not going to change. As we said before in the podcast, have I modified it? Yes.
Yeah.
Have I even,
protect your heart, though?
Right, to protect my heart, or if I was wrong.
Right.
You know, like if I thought, oh, Eric, come on, now you got that one wrong. How about you do better at this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, then of course you change it. So I don't want to seem like I'm like this is all it's going to be forever. And I did that in the 80s, and now it's 2020.
And I'm sure as your relationship grows in a more positive direction, that's gonna evolve as well.
Right, and that's how life works. Like,
and if it's a negative, it's gonna evolve in that way too.
Exactly. It might be K.
Yeah.
You know, it might be E. You know, or it might be Dad. Like I said, if anything that put some respect on my name.
I think it also has to do with love too, right? Because I think I often find it super loving when I give nicknames and when I'm nicknamed.
Right.
Because that means you have a place in my life.
Right.
And that nickname came from some shared experience of ours.
Right,
or
absolutely.
like you said earlier, something that I associate with you or describe our relationship as.
Right.
Something that I can describe you as in my life.
Right, absolutely.
And so had it been like, oh, we had a really cute moment on the playground and I rolled around and you rolled around and you made a joke and said we rolled around and I call you Rolly.
Right.
Like, you might love Rolly because you know it's a shared experience, even though it's silly.
Right.
And you know that is respect.
Right,
That
absolutely.
is based in love. Because I chose to nickname you because we have this shared experience and we have this shared bond.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's it in a nutshell. Like having that shared experience, having that, you know, for me it's respect. Mm-hmm. And then we can put respect at the top top tier. Yeah. And then everything that comes off of that is, like you just said, what's deserving.
Right.
And what am I teaching you?
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm just thinking, like, for the caller, I'm thinking, you know, first of all, like you said, we're always going off the premise that you have, before you brought someone into your kids' lives, you know who this person is. Right. Enough that you're able to vouch for this person. And
that they deserve a title.
Right. I mean, they better deserve a title if you brought them into the building. And that you're saying you vouch for them. You vouch that, you know, because how difficult is it? And how good is your word? How good is their word? Right. Or are you just kind of fly by night, and you kind of, if you're a woman, you want to that's what you wanted for the moment. Yeah. And you wanted to play house, like my mom and dad said. You just call it playing house. And then, you know, a couple weeks later, not so much no more. Right. You know, how important it is. Again, we're working off the premise that things are all above board right now. Right, yeah, well, yeah. And the thing is, you know, we've discussed so many times that this is a thing that constantly evolves. And I can say as a 32-year-old woman that I'm still evolving in what I call my stepfather. Because now, even though we never had this conversation, I've always just called him by his name. Right. And I don't know that my parents ever had that discussion. I can't speak to that. But no discussion was ever had with me. Right. But now that I'm an adult and I'm able to look back and realize what my stepdad did for me as a day in, day out dad and being the role model of my life, for what a father is, I do feel weird calling him by his name because I feel like he is deserving of dad. But after almost 30 years of my life calling him by his first name, it is habit. And it's a habit that's difficult to break because it's like switching a light on when you come into a room. You don't think about, let me walk into this room and then switch this light on. Your hand automatically goes to, you know, to pop it on when you go into a room. That's the same way with calling him by his first name. It's now instinctual, but I don't think it meets the criteria of the man he's been in my life. That's a big statement, and that's something that, I mean, something that I would think you would have to navigate for the benefit of yourself and for him, because life is short. Yeah. And because life is short, everyone that is deserving must get what they deserve. Correct. You know, and I mean, and I think the good thing is that I've done that in other ways. Oh, okay. So
I will make sure that you feel special on your special days.
Right.
You know? Right. And even on your not special days, I will make sure to say I love you, thank you for being in my life, and blah, blah, blah.
Okay. And that always
and so
good.
Right. So we have moments throughout the years where I know he appreciates and understands that I understand what he's done for me and who he is in my life.
If I had to give you advice, I would say that's wonderful. Mm-hmm. But if something is on your heart, you need to address it. So if it's on your heart to say, he's deserving.
Yeah.
And not just he's deserving, I'm deserving. I'm deserving of that. So I think that sometimes is like the flip side of this life, right? The flip side of it is not only is let's just speaking of you, but not only is he deserving of it, but fear should not allow me not to be deserving of what I know would make me feel good. And the fear is only from the dad.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's with you, I don't know, or someone else. That level of fear. Now I'm not talking about that. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're grown people now.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm talking about that level of fear of, man, how is that gonna look? Am I gonna do that at Christmas? Am I gonna do it when they're both standing there? If they ever stand there?
Yeah.
Like I used to think about that for my girls. When my middle child, you would say, when she would call me, when she would say, "Daddy," I would, as much as I would enjoy it, I would really think, is that gonna make it super uncomfortable for her? I would think of that.
And I can tell you, as a 32-year-old woman, it's something that I'm still grappling with.
Right.
I have been able to make the transition in reference to my stepfather calling him dad. Like today, I texted my brother because I'm doing Christmas shopping, and I said, hey, what size is dad in shoes? Because I know that sometimes I'll hear my stepdad say, I gave Spencer some shoes because they didn't fit me, or I don't like them anymore, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so I know he knows dad's shoe size. So in reference to him, I call him dad.
Yep, that's how
it starts. So I kind of...
Is it to make Spencer feel better, or is it for yourself?
Both, right? Because I think it is awkward to go to my brother and name my stepdad by his name.
That's why they're blended.
That's weird. And also, I think also it's descriptive of the way I view my stepfather. He's my dad.
Right.
But I will say it's something, it's uncomfortable because I have to be conscious about it, and it doesn't feel natural, and I don't want to fabricate that. You know, I don't want to fabricate that dad and make it be like, I'm calling you dad now. You know, like it's not, and especially because it's not like I'm a kid who lives with my parents anymore. Like I see him, a couple times a month or whatever, and we spend time together. And also, like, I don't know, it's not natural. And I think I'm in a world of like gray area with that, because I want it to feel natural, but it feels unnatural because I have 30 years of calling him by his name.
Right.
Again, I am referencing him as dad. I have no problem saying that. That makes me feel comfortable.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever get there.
Right.
I don't know if I'll ever get there. And it's not any disrespect to my stepfather. It's just, it's something that's kind of ingrained in me, being that especially since that conversation was never broached.
Right.
It wasn't something that my parents came down and said, we're going to sit down and talk about what you call your stepfather.
Right.
And I don't know if
I wonder if families have those conversations.
It really is situational, because I never questioned him as anything. I never called him anything but Papi. I called him Papi. That's Papi, right? That was just ingrained in who I was, and I was introduced to my stepfather by his name, so I called him by his name.
Right.
And I think because my biological father was always a presence in my life, I very early on distinguished between the two. And so I think if that presence wasn't there, it would leave a lot more room for me to grow in that title relationship with my stepfather.
Right. Well, I tell you what, in that whole blended idea, there's so many different, like we say, those nuances that go on. Like this, when we could talk all day about whether the title, you know, because your stepdad don't have a title. He did phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, and you recognize that. I mean, obviously without...
You know what's interesting? Even as a kid, I knew that. I remember going to my mom. I don't know if I went to both of them or my mom, but saying that I wanted to change my last name.
Right.
And I was, anywhere between, let's say, 8 and 12.
Right.
In those years. And I remember saying it because I thought it would make him happy.
Right.
Not because it's something that I sincerely thought, like, this represents who I am.
Did you ever feel like you were, all right. So
and no conversation was broached about this. I came out of nowhere. I'm sure it seemed out of, like, left field to them. Like, but it was just, I remember thinking, I don't know what drove me to that thought, but I remember thinking, it'll make him happy.
Was there ever a time when you looked and you said, at that moment, that you can remember, when you said, I want to change my name, did you guys go somewhere where everybody had the same name? Because your mom has the name, he has the name.
Right. And I think it would have been a more cohesive thing. And my mom spent a lot of years being called by my last name, which is my biological father's last name.
Okay.
By teachers and stuff like that who just, didn't know the better. Honestly, I put it out there, and I don't think they ever picked it up. They didn't. I think they were waiting for me to pursue it further, and when I didn't, they just dropped it.
Right, yeah, because that's so touchy, right?
Right, like they never...
Because our goal as parents is to say, okay, this is a moment, especially when you're young.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I remember I used to have jerseys that had Armstead on the back of them.
Yeah.
Right, because a couple of my family members played football, and so... and then they would have their, it was pretty cool to have that. And my girls would wear it. One more than other. And I always remember thinking that, and that's just the name on the back of their shirt.
Yeah.
Which is a humongous step. So
But you can take it off.
Right, yeah. And as a parent, that's one of those topics that we probably would have did the same thing, kind of like, yeah, let's not talk about that no more.
Yeah.
Because the last name is super important.
Yeah, I know
it's a
my
whole
mom.
Bloodline, right?
Right. I know my mom would have really, I can say without asking her, had that conversation with my dad. But again, they never brought it up again. I never brought it up again, and I think they just thought it was kind of like a random. They thought it was probably like a random moment. I don't know if my stepdad let himself get happy about it or not.
Of course he did.
So yeah, I can't speak to it because I don't know what's happening in the background.
Oh yeah, in the background, I'll tell you, I was wrong before. Well, at least you say I was wrong. Your mom kind of verified it. But
okay, so facts don't matter. Got it.
Yeah, facts don't matter. Anyway. Yeah. So no, definitely was. Of course he was excited.
Yeah.
Of course he was like, but then as an adult, you're like, well, come on. We're gonna let that.
And I gotta tell you, had my biological father, asked me why I wanted to do that, I wouldn't have had a reason to give him.
Right.
I wouldn't. Right. Outside of, I don't know, I'm with them all the time, and and I wouldn't have had the balls to tell my biological father, it would make my stepdad happy.
Right. So as we go into this blended more and more, it's just something else that I realized that there's so many different levels of emotion that young people go through.
Do you feel like you learn from my experiences, like the stuff I say about being a child in a situation? Because you're always coming from the parent perspective.
Yeah, I feel like I learn a lot. I feel like I learn another perspective from that age. It almost feels like real time when I'm looking at. I can almost see my girls at your age.
Yeah.
And as we have conversation more and more about, what they felt. Sometimes I'm way off.
Yeah.
On what they probably were thinking, and I know they're not anomalies, and nor are you.
Yeah.
So that has to mean in an emotion realm that there's some emotions that were equal.
Right. Yeah.
Like the same. Like I got a stepdad, you got a stepdad.
Right.
And here are the things that are going on emotionally in our mind.
Those emotions can range so much based on what that step parent is putting into the relationship.
Right.
Because kids aren't stupid. They respond to discipline.
Right.
As much as they don't like it, they do respect it, and
right.
they are going to go to the reliable source over the unreliable source. Right?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
There's no question kids are not dumb in that they know what's safe and secure and what isn't.
Right. And they know who they can trust.
Correct.
When it comes down to their selves, their well-being.
Yeah.
Food, clothing, shelter, just feeling good. To come with real answers.
I think at the end of the day, you have to live true to your character.
Right.
And as long as you've done what you need to do as a parent, be it biological or step, your kids will come around. I know that's true of my situation with my stepfather. I came around.
Right. And I think in my situation as well, working hard, do the things we need to do.
Yeah.
Try to keep a close-knit family and set a standard. That's the blended, baby.